Right now, somewhere in the world, 40% of adults are lying awake, staring at the ceiling. Most of them think it's stress. It's not. You know the feeling. It's 3 in the morning. Your body is exhausted, but your mind won't shut up. It replays conversations you had 6 months ago. It invents arguments with people who aren't in the room. It drags up memories you thought you had buried a long time ago. You grab your phone. You scroll. You tell yourself you just need to relax. But the voice doesn't stop. It never stops. Here's what you don't know. That voice keeping you awake isn't random. Sigmund Freud identified exactly what it is over a century ago. And once you understand it, you'll never hear it the same way again. Let me describe something and tell me if it sounds familiar. You're in bed. The room is dark. You've been tired all day, counting down the hours until you could finally sleep. But the moment your head hits the pillow, something switches on. Maybe it's a conversation you had with your boss. Not just the conversation itself, but the thing you should have said. The perfect response that came to you 3 hours too late. You rehearse it. You rewrite it. You play it over and over until the words blur together. Or maybe it's not work. Maybe it's a person. Someone who left. Someone you let go of. You haven't thought about them in weeks, maybe months, but tonight at 3 in the morning, their face appears behind your eyelids like they never left. You remember specific details, the way they laughed, the last text message, the silence that followed, or maybe it's something darker, a feeling with no name, a heaviness in your chest that doesn't attach itself to any specific memory, just a low, constant hum of wrongness. Like something in your life is broken and you can't figure out what it is. If any of this sounds familiar, you're not alone. The peak hour for wakefulness among insomniacs isn't midnight. It isn't 1 or 2 in the morning. It's 3. Between 3 and 4 a.m., your cortisol begins its daily surge. Your melatonin drops, and your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational thought and emotional regulation, hits its weakest point in the entire 24-hour cycle. At 3 in the morning, the rational part of your brain is essentially offline, and something else takes over. Now, you might think the solution is simple. Meditation apps, white noise machines, melatonin supplements, breathing techniques. Sure, some of those might help you fall asleep faster, but they are treating the symptom, not the cause. Because the reason you can't sleep at 3 a.m. has nothing to do with your mattress, your screen time, or your caffeine intake. It has to do with something far older, far deeper, and far more uncomfortable. Lie down, close your eyes. This is your session. In 1895, in a dimly lit office on Bergasse 19 in Vienna, a wealthy woman named Fanny Moser lay on a couch and said something to her doctor that would change psychology forever. Her doctor was a 39-year-old neurologist named Sigmund Freud. At the time, Freud was practicing hypnosis. He would put patients into a trance and try to access their hidden memories. But Fanny Moser was different. She didn't want to be hypnotized. She looked at him and said, simply, "Stop interrupting me, just let me talk." And so Freud did something radical. He shut up. He sat in his chair, behind the couch, out of sight, and he listened. What came pouring out of her wasn't a list of symptoms. It was a flood of memories, feelings, fears, and half-forgotten moments from decades earlier. Things she didn't even know she remembered. Things she had never told another human being. That night, Freud realized something that would become the foundation of everything he would ever build. The human mind has a basement, and the things we store down there don't disappear. They wait. Freud called this the unconscious, not the subconscious, which is a common mistranslation. The subconscious implies something just below the surface, easily accessible. The unconscious is something else entirely. It's a locked room, a vault, a place where your mind puts everything it decides you are not ready to face. Now, most people hear the word repression and they think of trauma, terrible events, abuse, catastrophic loss. But Freud discovered something far more unsettling. Repression is ordinary. You don't need a traumatic childhood to have an unconscious full of buried material. You just need to be human. One of his patients, a young woman he called Elisabeth, came to him with a mysterious leg pain that no doctor could explain. Freud spent weeks talking to her, and eventually the truth surfaced. Elisabeth had been in love with her sister's husband. When her sister died, Elisabeth stood at the funeral, and for one brief, horrifying moment, a thought flashed through her mind. Now he's free. He can be mine. The thought lasted less than a second. She buried it instantly. She was disgusted with herself. She never spoke of it, but her body spoke for her. The leg pain appeared the next day and never left. Her mind couldn't hold the guilt, so it pushed it into her body. The thought went to the basement, and the basement sent it back as pain. That's repression, not forgetting. If you forgot something, it would be gone. Repression is putting something in a box, locking it, hiding it in the deepest part of your house, and convincing yourself the box doesn't exist. The box is still there. And at 3 a.m, when the rational guard at the front door of your mind finally falls asleep, the box opens. Think about your own life for a moment. Have you ever had a thought that scared you? Not about something external, but about yourself. A flash of jealousy towards someone you love, a moment of satisfaction when someone you know failed, a desire you find shameful. What did you do with that thought? You pushed it down. You told yourself you didn't really think that. You moved on, but the thought didn't move on. It went to the basement. It joined all the other thoughts you've pushed down over the years, and they sit there in the dark, accumulating, growing, waiting for 3 a.m. But it goes deeper than that, much deeper. In 1900, Freud published a book that scandalized the medical establishment. It was called The Interpretation of Dreams, and in it he made a claim that most of his colleagues found absurd. He said that dreams are not random. They are not meaningless fireworks produced by a resting brain. Dreams are messages, encrypted, disguised, deliberately obscured messages from the unconscious mind. Think about the dreams you remember, the ones that stuck with you. Maybe you dreamed about falling, endlessly, with no ground in sight. Freud would say that's not about falling. It's about losing control in some area of your life you haven't consciously acknowledged. Maybe you dreamed about being chased, your legs heavy, your movements slow, like running through water. That's not about danger. That's about a truth you're running from, an internal truth that's pursuing you because you refuse to turn around. Maybe you dreamed about showing up naked in front of a crowd. That's not about embarrassment. That's about the fear that people will see who you really are beneath the version of yourself you've built for them. Or maybe you had the one almost everyone has at some point, your teeth crumbling, falling out of your mouth one by one, and you can't stop it. Freud connected that dream to powerlessness. Something in your waking life is decaying, falling apart, and you feel completely unable to hold it together. One of Freud's most famous cases involved a man he called the Wolf Man. As a child, this patient had a recurring nightmare. He dreamed of sitting in his bed, the window suddenly opening, and outside on the branches of a large tree sat 6 or 7 white wolves. They were completely still. They just stared at him. The dream terrified him so badly, he would wake up screaming. Freud spent years unpacking that single dream. What he found buried underneath it was a memory from when the boy was barely 2 years old, a scene he had witnessed in his parents' bedroom that his conscious mind had completely erased. The dream wasn't about wolves. It never was. The wolves were a disguise. The unconscious had taken something the boy couldn't process and wrapped it in a symbol his sleeping mind could survive. Your recurring dream works the same way. The surface image is never the point. The point is what's hiding behind it. And this connects to something even more disturbing. In 1920, Freud described something he called the repetition compulsion. He had noticed a pattern he couldn't explain. People who had experienced painful events didn't just repress them, they repeated them. A woman abandoned by her father would unconsciously choose partners who would abandon her. A man humiliated as a child would place himself in situations where he would be humiliated again. The mind was trapped in a loop, returning to the same wound, not because it wanted to suffer, but because it was trying to solve something it never solved the first time. Think about your own patterns, the type of person you keep choosing, even though you know how it ends. The argument you keep having in every relationship, different face, same fight. The moment where things start going well and you do something, almost on autopilot, to blow it up. The job you quit right before the promotion. The friendship you sabotaged the moment it got too close. That's not bad luck. That's not a character flaw. That's your unconscious mind running a program it wrote a long time ago, trying to reach an ending it never got. And here is the 3 a.m. equation. At 3 in the morning, 3 forces converge. First, repression loosens. Your ego is at its weakest. The material you've been pushing down all day, all week, all year begins to surface. Second, dreams activate. Your unconscious starts sending its coded messages, images, and scenarios designed to make you confront what you've been avoiding. Third, repetition takes over. Your mind begins replaying the loops, the unfinished conversations, the unresolved relationships, the unfelt grief, the unlived possibilities. You're not losing sleep. You're being visited by yourself. That thought that keeps circling at 3 a.m., the one you can't shake, the one that feels both urgent and impossible to define, that thought is your unconscious mind trying to hand you something, a piece of yourself that you locked away, a truth you've been managing around instead of moving through. And the reason it comes at 3 a.m. and not at 3 p.m. is simple. During the day, you're too busy, too distracted, too defended. Your ego is running the show, managing your image, keeping your life on track, making sure you don't fall apart in public. But at night, the ego clocks out, and the unconscious has been waiting all day for exactly that moment. This isn't poetry. Modern neuroscience has confirmed it. There's a network in your brain called the default mode network. It activates when you're not focused on any external task, when you're lying in bed at 3 a.m. with nothing to do. And what does it do? It processes autobiographical memory. It revisits unresolved emotional experiences. It runs simulations of social scenarios. It does, in measurable brain activity, almost exactly what Freud described the unconscious doing 100 years before the first MRI machine existed. Freud didn't have the technology to see inside the brain, but he described what the technology would eventually reveal. The mind does have a basement, and the basement does have a schedule. Researchers have even found that people who suppress emotional thoughts during the day show significantly more default mode network activity at night. The more you push down during daylight, the louder the basement gets after dark. Freud said this in 1900. Neuroscience proved it in 2020. And then there's the phone. When you can't sleep at 3 a.m., you reach for it. It's right there on the nightstand. You pick it up and start scrolling. You check Instagram and watch someone's vacation story and feel a sting you can't name. You open your ex's profile even though you told yourself you'd stop. You add things to your Amazon cart you'll never buy because for a moment the act of wanting something feels like having something. You read a news headline that makes you angry and then you read the comments and get angrier. You go down a rabbit hole of strangers' lives, comparing their highlights to your behind the scenes, and the whole time you tell yourself you're winding down. Freud would tell you the opposite. Every image you scroll past is more material for the unconscious. Every profile you visit is another comparison you won't acknowledge in daylight. Every late-night impulse is a need you're trying to fill without admitting what the need actually is. The phone at 3 a.m. isn't a distraction, it's a confession. The things you search for when no one is watching, the accounts you visit, the content you consume in the dark, those are the truest map of your unconscious desires. You're not calming the mind, you're feeding it. You're giving the basement more boxes to store, and tomorrow night, at 3 a.m., it will unpack every single one of them. Freud was not right about everything. His obsession with sexuality has been largely rejected. His analysis of women was deeply flawed. But on this subject, on what happens when the conscious mind goes quiet, his core insight has been validated by neuroscience, cognitive psychology, and sleep research alike. The unconscious is real. It speaks, and it chooses 3 a.m. because that's when you're finally too tired to keep lying to yourself. Tonight, when you can't sleep, try something different. Don't fight it. Don't reach for your phone. Don't try to force yourself back to sleep with breathing exercises or counting backwards from 100. Instead, ask yourself one question. What is my mind trying to finish? Don't answer it. Not right away. Just ask it. And then lie there in the dark and listen. Not to the anxiety, not to the surface level chatter about deadlines and bills and that awkward thing you said at dinner last week. Listen to what's underneath all of that. The quieter voice. The one that doesn't shout. The one that only comes out when everything else has gone silent. It might take a few minutes. It might take longer, but if you stay still long enough, you'll hear it. And when you do, you'll realize it's been saying the same thing for a very long time. You just weren't quiet enough to hear it. Freud believed that the unconscious mind is not your enemy. That's the most misunderstood part of his entire legacy. He said the unconscious is the most honest part of you. It remembers what you've chosen to forget. It knows what you actually want, even when you're too afraid to admit it. It holds the feelings you've been managing instead of feeling, the truths you've been decorating instead of confronting, the version of yourself you abandoned because someone told you it wasn't acceptable. The voice at 3 a.m. isn't keeping you from sleeping. It's the only version of you that's brave enough to speak. Maybe it's time you listened, but your unconscious doesn't only speak at 3 a.m. It speaks every time you choose the wrong person to love, every time you push away someone who gets too close, every time you repeat a mistake you swore you'd never make again. There's a pattern running underneath every relationship you've ever had, and Freud said it was installed before you turned 5 years old. In our next session, we'll talk about the invisible blueprint that controls who you love, who you leave, and who you let destroy you. And you won't like what you hear. This has been your session on the Couch Freud. If you want to understand what your mind is hiding from you, subscribe. New sessions every day.